Awesome. Welcome, everyone. We are now live. Super excited to have Billy, head of design here at Headway, to talk to you about creating user flow diagrams and customer journey maps and some of the processes and mindset that we use here at Headway to make that happen. As a reminder, this event will be recorded, and we might edit it a little bit and re-upload it to our YouTube channel next week, but it will be recorded. And if you have questions throughout today's conversation and presentation, be sure to leave comments in the chat there. We'll do our best to probably answer those more towards the end so Billy can kind of get through his presentation and get a full scope. You know, sometimes you ask a question and then the presenter answers it later on. So we appreciate everyone being here. Thank you so much for joining us. And with that, I can hand it off to Billy and he can take it from here.
Thank you, Jacob. First of all, welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about creating user flow diagrams from customer journey maps. Journey mapping and ultimately app mapping is a really important part of our design process. And we're going to kind of walk through that process and kind of give you some examples of how we do that. We'll be leveraging FigJam to kind of go through this process here in this presentation. There's a lot of ways to go about this. This is just a single example, so feel free to take parts that work for you and your team. And like Jacob said, any questions or anything, save them till the end, and we can jump back through any of this stuff and kind of do that. I'm excited to hear your feedback and maybe some of the things that you and your team do as well. Like Jacob said, my name is Billy Sweetman. I'm the head of design here at Headway. I've been doing design for feels like an eternity, probably 10 plus years. Started in the game design world and moved into product design after that. If you have, like Jacob said, this will be recorded on YouTube, so definitely check this out later. And if you want to keep up to date with any of our talks or anything like that, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, we have a design newsletter as well that we send out. We'll have notify you of new talks and things that are going on. Cool, let's jump into it here. So what is user journey mapping? And why is it so important? Well, it really helps us understand our users better. It helps us give us that 10,000-foot view of our product. And this will really inform everything we do after this, our wireframes, our app flows, our product design. And it helps us get into that user mindset. You can kind of think of a user journey map as sort of a linear path through your product or a timeline of events, capturing sort of a narrative experience of what your user is going to go through. An example I like to use is Pixar. The animation studio puts these color scripts together to give the mood that they're trying to convey for their movie. And we're kind of doing the same thing when we're building out these user journey maps. We're kind of capturing different stages along the way, what the user is going to be doing, how they might be feeling, things like that. So what are some of the tools that we've used to capture this information? So we've used things like Miro or Sketch in the past. Whimsical is a tool that we've used a lot. Google Drawings, Figma now with FigJam, and even before that, you can do that in there as well. Or you might do this on a whiteboard. Get your team together and you're kind of going through on a large whiteboarding space, putting this all together. So it really doesn't matter what tool you're using. Like I said before, we're in FigJam today, but we've done this in all these different tools. And really, this is just a mindset and some best practices to go through and do this on whatever tools that you might have. So what do we need to do to get started? So one of the first things we need to think through is we need to figure out what our user goals are. User goals and sort of threads that we identify. What is our user trying to achieve with this product? For this example, we're going to be using a fake app called Squad Up, something that we use in previous talks. And the idea is that we've already done countless interviews with potential customers, and we found some common threads and some goals that we've identified. Our users are looking to find recreational sports teams to play with either a pickup game or like a league. They don't know where to look. They don't know how to find them. They don't just want to show up to a gym. They have a fear of being rejected and not being selected to play in a pickup game. They don't have time to just show up or to do the research themselves. And they might not have any friends to play in those sports. So they'll need to contact some strangers. And how do we alleviate some of that? So what we'll do initially is we'll start capturing those goals or those threads that we hear in those interviews. This is a small example here with a bunch of note cards. We'll have these note cards laid out. And we might have a team of people going along in these interviews, all capturing different notes, and we'll kind of place them in here. So in FigJam here, we have some pink ones for some individual cards that we've captured. And then we're using green to capture sort of a different type of goal or thread that we're identifying with the league examples. So we'll add different bits in here, like I'm willing to drive a bit, but it needs to be close. So we heard that in some of our interviews, so we'll capture that data as well in there. We're going to use a group chat. Maybe we heard that via SMS or Facebook. That might be something we've heard in some of those interviews. And this will really help us start to unpack some of those goals. And then what we'll do is we'll take these and we'll start to put these in clumps. And these clumps will be either on a single thread or a single goal that we've identified. Understanding these goals will help us figure out what our customers are trying to achieve. And we might even take these and turn these into personas. That's a little bit of a different talk, but that's usually a step that we might do after this. We'll develop some individual personas. Obviously somebody who wants to do some league play is a little bit different than somebody who's looking to do just a pickup game. And so we might develop some user personas for that. So taking some of these goals and threads we've identified, we'll start to unpack these into a user journey. So here we've identified a user called Rebecca, and we've started to map out the journey she's going to take. This initial journey is really important because it helps us understand a lot of things that the customer cares about. And establishing those goals, we can start to put those things into this finite timeline here. We might consider how do they get access to the product. That's something that we might put in here. For this example, we're not going to be doing that. We might consider what they're feeling while using the product. We don't have that captured in here. Really, you can decide what fidelity you want to go through when you're capturing your user journey. When we're working through the stories, we'll map out sort of left to right sequentially what we feel is like the best practice scenario or the most ideal state for going through the app. And the way we break it down normally is we have the customer's goal as the top thing. So here we have finding a pickup league or finding a pickup game or a league to play in. What are the stages they're going to take to accomplish that? What are some of the activities that they might be doing? So we have selecting favorite sport, selecting days we're free to play, selecting distance. What features or data might we need to accomplish those activities? And those are sort of our yellow cards down here. And then any opportunities that we might notice. These opportunities can be things like, do we recommend additional sports? When is a good time to trigger a follow-up email? Things like that, different opportunities we see in the app. So for this example, like I said, we're going to skip the customer discovery part of the journey, and we'll jump to where we've already downloaded the app. We know what specific sports, we know we have specific sports they're looking for, but we don't have that captured in here. So we'll kind of keep adding along on our journey to add all of these different things. So, we'll just copy here and we'll say like, we want a specific sport selection. And in there, we might also say, or actually, we already have specific sports. So here we'll say like type of play. And we'll want this to say, what's the data that we in here? We know we heard leagues in our user interview, so league play. So we'll want to capture that in there, and then pickup game. And we have this setting up my parameters, but what's my next steps after setting up my parameters? So I've established my onboarding process, I've set up my parameters, and my next step I think is like searching through maybe a listing of matches, so searching through matches that match my parameters through onboarding. What are some of the activities I might do when I'm searching through those matches? So thinking through here, we might have, we're probably gonna need additional filter criteria, something that we might be, we did a pretty good job of matching, but we're not perfect all the time. So we might see some additional filter items, So filter items there. And then, what else would we need? Well, we're obviously going to scroll through scroll through matches. That's an activity that we might do, and we might also need to view event details. So we're going to view event details. In the event details, we're going to want to capture some stuff in that event details. What did we identify in our user goals that were really important? Event name, obviously that's pretty important. Who's hosting it? We had a fear of not knowing somebody or doing that first introduction. So who is hosting? We want to make sure that that's displayed on there. And then obviously sport type makes sense. Distance is something that we might have talked about. That's something we don't want to drive too far, so what's close to me. And then also availability. When does it start? Different things that we heard in through those interviews and goals. So we'll start to unpack this map, and I have a completed map down. Oh, my completed map went away, so never mind. But we'll start to unpack this map and start adding a ton of these sequential steps as we go through that. Now, this is really good to help have some of those initial conversations. Through here, we might even stick some sticky notes with our development team as we're walking through, and we might add details like onboarding seems long. Should we make it a little bit shorter? So we can start having conversations and we can start to walk through and get an idea of what the flow of our product is going to be, how, what are some sticky points, where is some contention on ideas and things that we're hearing, and different directional pieces here. However, this doesn't help really build out sort of an architecture for what we're going to design or what we're going to put on the screen yet. It definitely gives us a bunch of data points and some activities and a story to go through. And from this journey, we can really start to unpack this into those stories. So at this point, one thing we could do is start to put it in a tool like Stories on Board. We use this tool, Stories on Board. This helps us with a Moscow process for building out different products. Moscow is must-have items, should have items, could have items, and would have items. And we can start to unpack that in here. We know we're going to have things like onboarding during the process. We'll ask some questions. We'll have recommended events and teams, and we can start to identify this. And this could be where this process ends. Is we put everything on here, and now we know what we need to start designing and building out. However, as a designer, I find it a lot easier to think about that app map process and starting to unpack things in sort of that architectural sense. So let's jump into app mapping. So we've already started this app mapping here, but once we have our journey and story started out, we can start to map this out and start to build out this structure. This acts as kind of a high-level blueprint and helps us work through the design and helps us understand how things connect. We can even walk through steps of our process or user journey and see how they will get things on the map, so we can walk through narratively and figure out the flow and those connections. And we can do this all before we wireframe. We like to put little UI mockups in there, super loose, just to communicate some ideas of what these screens are going to look like and what they're going to be. And just make sure that we have that data or have that on there so that can inspire the wireframe discussion that we might have later on. Here, we'll want to start by laying out the screens we might need. We've already laid out a few of those on here. We'll know we need a login. We know we need a sign up flow. We know we have an onboarding flow. And we put, hey, there's a lot to unpack here. We probably need to add some more fidelity to this. We know we'll need a user dashboard, so we have that put here. And we'll have some high level filtering options that we might add that we established before. So we've created these little pieces already. And we're going to have filtering on dashboard. This is part of the dashboard. We know we need to filter, and we're going to have different types of filters like sport type, game type, time, date, distance. And we know that's going to spawn off our dashboard. So in FigJam, that's just Shift-C to get you a little line there. We're also know that we're going to have some event details. That's also going to come off from our dashboard. So back in our journey, we said event details, and we've kind of added this down here. We're going to do a little half card. Conceptually, we think that's maybe a direction we can go, so we can put that in here. So in event details, we're going to display name. We know that we're going to display time, host, who's hosting it. We're going to display distance, a lot of the different things that we are going to filter on. And we're going to be able to get to that from our dashboard by just selecting an event. And we know that our filter, we might have another state for a filtered dashboard. So we can copy this over here and we'll say, this is our filtered dashboard. We're going to have a lot of the same pieces in here. I think the big call out that we want to say is we need a way to cancel our filter. Cancel. I cannot type today. Cancel filter. So we're going to go from our filtered dashboard or from filtering to our filtered dashboard. That's also going to give us access to an event details if we go there, and then we could cancel this out to get back to our user dashboard. And now we've kind of created that loop. And so now we've started to unpack a little bit more details about these individual screens, the actions that we need to take on these screens, and sort of some of the loops or some of the user interactions that we're going to do in these individual things. We can even start laying out microflows. So as a team, we kind of go through, we have a conversation about, hey, here's what we're thinking we're going to build. This is the flow that we've identified that we think is key. During that, we might throw a sticky note up here that says, hey, there's a lot to unpack here. We'll tend to put little alerts. Let me zoom in here. Put a little alerts on things that we might have discussions about. On onboarding flow, we need to show a list of sports. What sports do we show? Can they add their own sport? We'll also want to capture availability. And then, maybe through discussion with our development team or our product owner, we said there's a lot, let's unpack this in more detail. And this is something that, through this iterative process of doing these app flows, we can start to find out items that we need even before we start wireframing or building any screens out. So for this, microflow, we don't have to do it necessarily in the main flow if we wanted to. That's kind of the beauty of working on something that has a giant canvas like this, is we can start to unpack those microflows over here and link to it if we needed to. So before we're capturing favorite sports, we had a conversation, is there an issue with asking about two sports? What about single sport athletes, things like that? So we can have some more discussion there. But, we've got some other things that we want to ask about too. And actually, we're going to delete this because I'm going to show the other way to bring in your components here. So if you make components in FigJam and you share them, my sharing got. There they are. These are actually brought in a Figma library. So you can bring these components in from your Figma shared library into FigJam. So you can make these own screens yourselves and put little details together for this, for when you're working on your flows. So here we know, like, during our micro onboarding flow, we're going to ask the welcome screen and ask them favorite sports. But what else are we going to ask? We're probably going to ask, can we use your location? So we'll just copy this real quick for sake of time. So use location, we're going to want to prompt before location device request here. So we'll want to have a screen in our app before we use the native UI to prompt about that device request. What are some of the other things during the onboarding that we might want to capture? We might want to capture distance traveled. So we'll grab this little input screen, make this a little bit bigger, and we'll say, like, what is the distance I'm willing to travel? Distance willing to travel. And they can enter value, or pre-selected items. And we can start to unpack these and start to unpack this flow in a little bit more detail. And it allows us to have more conversations with our development team, right? So we finish out this entire micro flow and we start wondering like, well, like when we ask location, what happens, what happens if we don't get location access? And this will start to help us have those conversations and start to ask those questions before we wireframe and before we even do any pixel pushing at all. So we can really get a good idea of how our app's going to look and how our app is going to flow before we spend a lot of time in those wireframing processes. So like I said, we can, doing these product apps and user apps and flows and walking through these is really, really powerful. You can even start to anchor UI elements that you think would be good. So everyone does mood boarding for their products, and you might do those on a separate screen, but you could even drop mood board elements right here on these user flows. This is the type of interaction we're looking for. Here's my inspiration for this input screen here. This is a great visual tool. It's working in the development team, and keeping this updated helps the development team know how things connect. Sometimes we'll take these and we'll link them to the actual screen designs in the Figma files. And this really acts as like a table of contents on how to get to that prototype flow or how to get to that screen. And we can start to even mark out progress on some of these screens to see where they are. So for example, as we're working through the onboarding flow, we could start to identify in here what's currently being done, what isn't done, what is completed, what's live in the app. We can start to keep this as a roadmap almost of how far along we are in the product. So hopefully this was helpful for everyone on just kind of how we think about taking those user interviews, unpacking those into threads and goals, and really taking those into customer journeys, and how we unpack those into these app maps. And as designers, how we use this to really start to leverage and think about the informational architecture, think about those flows before we get into sort of that zoomed in view of wireframing and that zoomed in view of actually designing screens. That being said, if we have any questions, I would love to answer some questions or show some more examples.
Love it. Thanks, Billy. Yes, if anyone has questions, be sure to share them there in the chat. Oh, here we go. Got one from John here. Show examples of team members commenting on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So we leverage comments in Figma a lot. So normally when we do comments, you drop in a normal comment like this. However, sometimes, you get the email notification and you can see that they're in there. So we normally would leverage the comment system here. So asynchronously, if somebody was reviewing this, recorded a Loom video, for example, and somebody's walking through this on their own, they might just say like, hey, I have an idea how to handle this. And they would post it here, and this would show up on the side here. I can see there's a comment now when I go into the comment mode. However, it is a little bit hidden on here. So we tend to prefer dropping in some Post-it notes on here as we're going through some of these notes. So somebody can say, I've went through and I've placed a bunch of Post-it notes on here. Please go take a look. Figma, the nice thing with FigJam is they provide a bunch of really cool stickers as well. So there's a bunch of stickers in here that you can use. That's like, hey, we've got a bunch of questions about this. Make it real big. No one's going to miss that. Throw your name next to it, and you'll be able to identify that and find your team's comments and questions and suggestions. Great question.
Awesome. Cool. We got another question here from Celino. Can you talk about how you run the discovery to gather the info you are filling into the map? Is there a framework that you use?
Yeah, so we, our product team, they lead a lot of these discovery discussions, and design is kind of with the product team. And so they've got a framework and a process that they go to capturing these, all these different notes. And a lot of it is, very similar to into capturing threads like this. And then while we are going through and capturing these threads, we might start clumping some of these around a specific theme. So if these were all related to, like, hey, these are all about timing issues, we might say, this is all timing related. And we try to get as many interviews as possible. And a lot of times it's like, what's your experience going through? For this example, it'd be like finding pickup games or finding league play. Like, what's your experience? And we might hear, their websites aren't very good. It's not very clear when things start. The newsletter isn't up to date, things like that. Or I don't have anyone to play with. And we'll start to gather those. And there usually is 2 people per interview, one person leading the interview and taking notes, and somebody else along, and that's usually a designer along, capturing those notes and putting them through post-it notes. We'll set up a bunch of empty post-it notes so we can just quickly type in as fast as possible. And then afterwards, we'll debrief and we'll start to identify specific goals or threads and what we heard. And we'll start color coding and organizing those things into different things that we can go after. We might hear a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't even align with what we're initially going after, and we might put those off onto the side. Awesome, great question.
Yeah, so I actually put a link into the chat there. There's another video on our channel about prototyping and feedback loops in that discovery process. So it's a conversation with Ryan from our product team, and then Clint. It's a good kind of understanding of how we kind of like lay out all the information in Miro or in FigJam, and then how do you synthesize that and turn that into a user experience. So it's a pretty good discussion. So be sure to check that out, everybody. We got another question here from Stephanie. At what stage do you include developers in this process?
Ideally, I'm a big fan of including them early on in probably the user journey mapping, if we can, just to get them thinking about what we're building and get some ideas about, maybe some touchy scenarios or things that we're suggesting, that might be a little bit more difficult to build out. But we start to really get into really deep conversations during this app flow process, because at this point, our development team's thinking like, how are they going to build it? What data do they need? Things that we are going to identify during this flow. And then they're going to be adding a lot of feedback to us here. Like, hey, we did this in the past on another project or another product, and this is actually an easier thing to capture than the way we've identified it here. And that's kind of the back and forth that we'll use. And this app flow really helps us have those conversations before we get into wireframing. Because once we start wireframing, we start to get anchored in on the look and the feel of things. And really what we're trying to capture is more of that abstract flow at that high level. How many steps are we going to take? What's the data we need to capture there? So great question. Yeah.
And she also kind of brought up, how do you include the technical constraints into that process? Because sometimes we might be building something in a no-code tool first, right? And so like understanding that, or if we're going to do full development for like an MVP. So I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, Billy.
Yeah, that's a great point. For example, let's say we're building something in a no-code tool, and we'll go through and we're talking about this onboarding flow. There's things that no-code tools do great, so Adalo can do something really great, but there's other things it can't do. And here we can put a pin on here that says, hey, swiping left and right in Adalo is very difficult and is very time consuming. Let's maybe consider not doing that here. And this helps us have that conversation early on instead of us presenting wireframes and going through sort of how we think something's going to work and then being told after the fact. So we can have a lot of those technical constraints or start having questions. Another example is like, let's say we're going to say, hey, this data table is going to have all these filter options. We want to present all these data points, and we're going to infinite scroll it. We can start ideating a little bit, and the development team can say, hey, one thing to consider is response time. It's going to take a long time to pull back those 10,000 entries. Infinite scroll might not be the way to do. Maybe we should paginate instead. So we can have some of those little conversations early on, and helps us set us up for success and a smoother wireframing design process and development process down the road.
Awesome. I wanted to step back and make sure we answered this question. I connected Stephanie's together because I felt like they were related, but Swetha asked, data collected here are decided based on user interviews and research. So kind of, I think she's asking, where is this data coming from to make these decisions?
Yes, so a lot of this will come out from that user research. So we're doing a bunch of user research, and we start to identify those threads, and we start to identify things that we might hear, like those common conversational pieces, and we'll start to make some assumptions in our customer journey map using that data. We'll say we think this is the thing that we want to do here. We think this is the thing that we want to do in this next step, and even sometimes we can take this and walk potential users through this flow and say, here's how we're thinking about doing this. Is this the order you might do this, right? So like this is something that we can provide to the product team, or we can go out and do those flow interviews and kind of walk through these together. But all of this data it would be captured from those user interviews and kind of follows along through that conversations that we have with our team. But at the end, it all comes back to those user interviews. And then obviously things that we've done in the past, best practices, if you've built something before and you felt this was really smooth and this really worked really well, here's something that that works, or a pattern that exists somewhere else that works really well, you can identify that as well. Great question.
Awesome. Next question, what's the good way to define stages in the customer journey map?
Yeah, great question. So the way I think of stages is, and you're kind of thinking a little bit of product loops or end-to-end flows, sort of that micro onboarding flow. So your goal is find a pickup game or a league to play in, or your goal is to, if you're on Zillow, find a house to go buy, or sell your house, those two examples. So there's one stage, which is like, you got to set up your information in your data that to get your house ready to sell, or in this example, you need to set up some parameters so we know what to recommend for you. So that's a stage. Then there's searching through matches, which is another stage. And then after that, there is now I found one that I want to be a part of. I found a team I want to play on, or a pickup game I want to go to. There's like a next stage there. It's sort of anything that we feel can be one end-to-end thing before we move on to that next process. And that's kind of what this journey mapping helps us unpack. The first time through journey mapping, we might not have all the stages broken out right. We might have stages that we feel are too long, or some that are too short and need to be combined. And that's why this is also an iterative process. And as a team, we'll be working through these journey maps, presenting, hey, here's what we think all the stages are, here are the activities in the stages, and we're gonna have a conversation. We're gonna iterate over this together to really find those right things. There is no like silver bullet on, this is a stage and this is a stage and this is a stage. It all depends on the product that you're making. And sometimes you'll find, you'll be moving stages around based on conversations and things that you're learning as you're kind of going through this process. Great question.
Awesome. Celino asks, any way we can get access to this FigJam project template?
Yeah, we will. We'll get this set up to share so everyone can have access to this.
Love it. Yeah, I think what we'll do is I can get a link, because we'll probably have to add it to the community, right, to make it public. And then we can link it up in the description of this when we get this video edited and stuff like that. So awesome. All right, next question. Do you use hand drawing tools during user interviews and brainstorming? It may be quicker.
Yes, we do in various ways. So some of our team uses iPads and they like to draw their notes on there and maybe do SketchUp things on there. If you're in the FigJam world, they have a little pen tool here. Drawing with a mouse is not great, but I personally have a Wacom tablet, so I can draw on here quickly. It's great to drop in bits, and like even here, these are obviously predefined little UI bits. It's nice to come in here and just do a quick sketch on like, I think this might be the right thing or the right solution for the specific problem we're trying to solve. So yes, I love hand drawing tools. I think everyone should have a Wacom tablet to get in here and sketch it out. Feels a little bit more tactile and moves a lot quicker. So great question.
Love it. This person asks, wondering if post wireframing and once development starts, do folks ever come back to the customer journey maps?
Once development starts, customer journey maps, Both of these, yeah, the app map and the customer journey map. And I've got two examples. So once development starts and we're working through a problem, there might be things that we identified early on in our customer journey map that we might have removed for either a timeline or a constraint. And we might go back to test on like, hey, this is what we thought was the right thing. Or the developed process that we're testing or the prototyped process that we're testing, we pulled this thing out and it's not hitting the way we think it is. Can we revisit that journey map and see what's there? Sometimes we'll iterate and adjust the journey map accordingly. I find a lot of times when we're spinning up new features or new flows for a product, we'll make a new journey map. So we'll build a lot of iterative journey maps, and it might be micro journey maps or micro app flows. We definitely come back to the app flow in various projects. Like we said, when we are building out a specific, we might be building up the onboarding flow separate from the, the find a match flow, and we'll come back and revisit this. And sometimes we turn this into sort of a table of contents. You can add links in here to link off to your screens or your prototype flows, and we'll come back to this and have those conversation bits. And other times we'll actually capture some of the prototype screenshots, bring them in here and set the status. So we've done a lot of different things with these. They're very versatile in various projects. So we do come back to them. Sometimes we don't, but a lot of times we do.
Awesome. This question is kind of a follow-up. I wanted to share this first. Do you recommend app flows kept up to date through the life of the product, or is this kind of just throwaway, use at the beginning just to get things moving?
Personally, I like to keep them up to date with the life cycle of the product, because what'll happen is a lot of times in the prototype view or in the screen view, sometimes we can't get a sense of how things connect or how things fit into the larger picture. So sometimes we like to keep these up to date, act like a table of contents, link out to all their different things. It allows us to have more abstract conversations about, are these the right decisions that we're making, instead of more nuanced UX decisions. I find when we get into the wireframing and we get into the prototyping flow of those high fidelity screens, we start talking a lot about like individual screen UX pieces and things like that. And here we're really just identifying, what are the data points that we need? What's the information architecture that we kind of want? What is the most important thing on the screen? So it helps us kind of abstract a little bit from that zoomed in view. Yeah, great question.
All right, awesome. How many journey maps would you evaluate for a project that is a little more diverse?
How many journey maps we evaluate for?
So maybe there's like different types of customers. For example, if there's someone that's like managing like the back end of something, but then there's also like someone that goes through the front end. It's like maybe someone's building content on the back, but then there's also the other side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good question. So certain products we'll develop out journey maps per user type. And sometimes those will be different journey maps, but it'll be the same app map. And what we'll do is we'll take some of these screens and identify, put a little avatar next to the side that says this is an administrative user, or this is a business user, and this is a customer user. They might be sharing a screen, and we have to identify different layouts or different visibility to things based on permissions or settings that they might have. So yeah, we'll do different customer journey maps for different user types for sure. And then we may do different app maps or different flow visualizations for those users, or we might do one. We do identify those users through. Before we were doing things in FigJam or in Whimsical, a lot of times we would have those specific flows, and we would just make the bits that we're not using a lower opacity, so we could have a conversation about a specific flow or a specific user type, but then you could see how everything else was connected to that larger, so you could always see that, get the larger sense of the world, even though you were focused on a little micro scale. So that allowed us to kind of communicate a specific user's interactions, but still see that larger view. Great question.
Awesome. This next one, do you think that user journey flows could be easily transformed into user stories to be used in agile sprints where the developers and designers could work on those topics together?
Absolutely, yeah. So like I said before, we kind of sometimes either from the journey map or the app flow, we unpack everything into a tool called Stories on Board, and here's where we can start to unpack these user stories and really start to unpack, have those detailed conversations. So each one of these allows us to have detailed conversations with the design, development, and product team on what we should be doing, what we should be making, and leveraging that. So really, like I said, for us, sometimes it goes from journey map into stories. Sometimes it goes from journey map to app flow into stories. If it goes into stories, even as a designer, sometimes I will do a user app / flow for myself, just so I have a better understanding of what needs to be laid out. And like I said, it doesn't have to be in here. You can sketch it out in your notebook. I've got a notebook filled with little diagrams of how things connect, just so when I'm getting into the wireframing, I don't have to think about how do all these pieces fit together. Yeah, great question.
Awesome. Well, I don't see any more questions at the moment, but while we're waiting for any more, we'll have to wrap up pretty quick here. I'm just going to share my screen, share some of the stuff, some of the resources we have here on our website, things that are coming up from Headway. All right, awesome. So obviously today we had this event up here, but in July we have 2 events. We don't have a design event in July, but we will in August. So look forward to that. Be on the lookout for that. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, you can get updates there. Otherwise, you can go to headway.io and go to our events page. You can register for upcoming events and stuff like that. So next month we're going to be chatting with Tom Kerwin, and he'll be talking about when to stop and think when you're working on an idea in the discovery process, and how do you kind of make better decisions using pivot triggers. So it's a kind of a cool model that he's created. So it's a really cool conversation that I think product and designers can both be a part of. And if you're into development, Chris from our development team will be talking about introduction to Tailwind CSS. So that'll be a fun one. And of course, if you head to our website and go further down, we have our past recordings in here. So if you're a designer, if you work in product, or if you work in development, we have different recordings from the past couple of years here, right here on our website. And they're also available on our YouTube channel as well. We also have our blog. So if you're interested in learning more about like the Figma plugins we use, how we do design system management, design tokens, all these different things, how our team thinks and works together, we have a bunch of articles on our blog. So be sure to check those out. And then also wanted to mention that we are hiring here at Headway. At the moment, we can only hire within the United States. So we apologize for those that are tuning in internationally. But right now we can hire within the US. So be sure to check out our careers page. We're looking for product, design, and development. So be sure to check out any of those. And I think that's it. So yeah. Let's see if we got some more questions. Awesome. I can stop sharing. Right. All right. The next question: how many days do you usually spend doing this flow and revising it? And when do you know it's time to start wireframing? Is there pressure to do this in a short amount of time, like for example, in an agency?
Yeah, great question. It really depends on the size and the scope of the project, of the product we're working on. If it, I'd say maybe anywhere from like a half a day to knock out a first user app flow or a journey map, and maybe a day total to kind of build it out. And then the iteration, it all depends on are we getting the right conversations, and are we finding that level of clarity together as a team before we start wireframing. The nice thing about adding in these little doodles for the wireframes, it kind of helps inform what you think you're going to be building out for those screens. So that's really, really helpful when you're working through that. But yeah, like it's part of our process. We're an agency, and we incorporate it into most of our projects. Something that we really try to work through and unpack in every project. And I would say probably on average, it's maybe 2 days total time. Once you build out the first map flow and we're iterating on it, usually we haven't experienced catastrophic restructures of everything. So I could see it taking longer, but it's definitely I don't know, maybe if I had to put a number on it, 2 days total time. Great question. Is customer journey helpful, or can we directly jump into user app flow, save time after brainstorming? I think both of them. Customer journey definitely helps bring clarity to what we need to do in the app flow. And I think whatever your personal process is, you can do, like I said before, we can do a customer journey map and not do an app flow. If that brings enough clarity, you can definitely go with that. If you want to jump right into the app flow, a lot of those data points do get captured there as well. So I think it comes down to what are the conversations that you're having and what brings the most clarity to you and your team. There are projects where we've skipped the customer journey map and went straight into the app flow, and they're very successful, and we were able to get all that clarity right there. And then there's other projects where we did the customer journey map, and then because we had such a robust system built out, it didn't make sense to do an app flow because we kind of knew the bits and pieces and a lot of the information architecture that we're going to need. We just need to capture that journey. So it's really, there isn't like a one size fits all. It's really like different tools that you can leverage on what you feel is going to bring you the most clarity and what you think is going to help have those really tactical conversations. Great question.
Awesome. I did share here. I'm curious of those of you tuning in right now, would love to know what topics you'd like to learn from us in the future. If we can probably take one more question if you have any other questions. And someone did ask, would love to know if this video will remain online. And I'll say, yes, this live stream link will always be available. What we do is we unlist it, usually after recording. I'll edit it and I'll re-upload it as a video instead of having the live stream like living forever. I cut out the front where I'm talking right in the beginning, so it gets right to the presentation. You know, the YouTube algorithm, getting people what they want sooner kind of thing. So, but yeah, we'll definitely, you can always go back to this link, but we'll also send out, if you register on Eventbrite, we'll send out a link to the new video with timestamps, so you can go to each little section, all that kind of stuff with notes and links to the FigJam file like we shared earlier. So yeah, all right, awesome. I'm seeing some things here. They shared micro interactions and prototyping. Oh,
yeah, absolutely.
Thanks,
yeah, that's something that we can capture in here as well. Like I said, we could grab some of those mood board bits and like drop those in here so we can start to think through some of those micro interactions.
Yeah, a hands-on mini project like as a workshop would be kind of fun. Like trying to figure out like if we could have like an app idea and just try to like have like a workshop where they can use a template file and kind of go through it together. That'd be kind of fun, yeah, for sure. Yeah, prototyping, lots of thank yous. Thank you so much, everybody. Oh yeah, version control. That would be a good one too, yeah.
We talk a little bit about how we manage version control in our design system talks, but we definitely, with some of the new stuff that's coming out, now that Figma has branching, it's something we should probably revisit.
Awesome. Well, cool. I think we can wrap it up. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Billy, for sharing all your wisdom and prepping that FigJam file, and we'll get the template out to everybody. So as a reminder, like I said before, this is recorded. You can go back to this link if you want, but we'll also send the recorded edit out next week in an email. If you registered on Eventbrite, we'll send it out to you, and we'll have all the resources. And like I said, you can head to our website. We'll have if you go to the event page on our website from this, you'll be able to see the video, all the links and stuff next week. And also on YouTube, like it'll be in the description, stuff like that. So again, thanks again, everybody. Thanks, Billy. Billy, you have anything else to share before we sign out?
No, just thank you everyone for tuning in. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me or hit me up on Twitter. I'm glad to dive in and help anyone with anything they're working on.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
All right. See you, everyone.